And this was the saving grace. This was supposed to redeem Joe Biden. And I want to ask you, and again, remember, you can take the poll afterwards on my YouTube channel or on Twitter and tell me what you think about this interview with Joe Biden. There are no edits. I'm not editing anything. This is exactly how ABC is putting it forth. So let's go through this together and tell me what you think about this, okay? Because we're going to critically think about this. So, from the beginning.
From ABC News, a special edition of This Week. President Joe Biden, his first television interview since...
Okay. So, edition of This Week.
Making exclusive. Now reporting from Madison, Wisconsin, George Stephanopoulos.
Good evening from Madison, Wisconsin for a special edition of This Week. The first broadcast interview with President Biden since last week's debate. Earlier this afternoon, we taped the 22-minute interview. There are no cuts, no edits. We have not touched it.
Okay, so this is important. He said that this interview was taped on, as you can see here, July 6th. Okay? So, Friday. He taped the interview with Joe Biden on Friday. And it was a 22-minute interview. So we know the time. What we don't know is, what time was it? Was it 10 a.m.? Was it noon? Was it 8 p.m.? Was it 6 in the morning? What time? This is critical to understand. It's one of the first questions that need to be explained. And George Stephanopoulos knows, as a journalist, as someone working in the media, he knows the concerns people have had. He knows that people are aware that Joe Biden only does interviews between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. because that's when he is the most lucid. So, to be fair, to be clear about his journalistic integrity, he should tell the public what time was this interview. Was this at 9 a.m.? Was it at 6 p.m.? Therefore, saying that reports saying that Joe Biden is only lucid from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., that they have been discredited. He could verify or denounce this idea, this fact that has been shared by the news media. He can either support it or denounce it by telling us very simply what time of day was this interview. He doesn't. So the first thing you should know about this interview is it's dishonest. He is starting with dishonesty. He is hiding information that is critical to the public to understand the context of this. Is this being done to maximize the response by Joe Biden? Is it done at a time where we know he is not at his best, and therefore we should take it with a grain of salt or understand it better? He's taken that context out from us. He has not informed the public. Therefore, he is on purpose manipulating you. So let's go on.
This pivotal moment in the presidential campaign, here it is.
Okay. He goes, there have been no cuts, no edits. He didn't say restarts. Did you start over? See, again, words can be very, very critical, and he knows this. George Stephanopoulos knows this. He didn't say that they started the interview and then had to restart. He also didn't answer the question, does the White House know any of the questions? He didn't say, oh, and the White House has no idea what I was going to ask. He never addressed that. And we know, as I showed you earlier with Earl and some of the others, and Laura, the White House has been, the Biden campaign has been injecting questions into interviews. So did he share the questions, any of the questions that he asked Joe Biden with the campaign or the White House? Did he get that approved first before he asked them? Did he give them a heads up and a warning of some of the things he was going to ask about? That's important. Again, going back to his journalistic integrity. If he's telling us there's no edits, if he's telling us there's no cuts, you're not telling us you didn't restart. You're not telling us that you did not give them the information ahead of time so that they were prepared, so that he could prepare for this. That's important. That's critical. And if you're trying to establish with the American people the credibility of this interview and the impartiality of this interview, then you would tell us the two critical things. What time of day was this? Did you tell them any of the questions? Did you prepare them for the interview? These are two critical questions that no one is addressing, and George Stephanopoulos does not want you to think about. He's trying to give you the veneer of impartiality and credibility, but at the same time, he's destroying that. He just doesn't want you to think about it. And the mainstream media doesn't want to bring that up because you're not supposed to notice. They want to fortify the 2024 election. They want to make this as friendly for Joe Biden as possible to make him look as good as possible, as you will see. Let's go on.
Mr. President, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the debate. You and your team have said you had a bad night, but
Sure did.
But your friend Nancy Pelosi actually framed the question that I think is on the minds of millions of Americans.
Now, before we go any further, so he's just introducing himself and saying, hey, he wants to talk about the debate and what has happened since that time. Look at Joe Biden's face. One, Joe Biden has a fake suntan. That's not his normal skin color. That's a spray-on tan. Look around his eyes. You can see the difference in the coloration. So that's one thing. He seems to have, and I could be wrong, but it seems if you look at his neck, if you look at his ears, look at the differences in the coloration. That's spray tan. Okay, fair enough. Minor thing. That's cosmetic. They just want him to look healthy. But that also means that he doesn't look as healthy without the cosmetics. That's a problem. Does that mean he's sickly, that he's not healthy? That's the concern. Is he covering up? Well, it could be vanity. It could be just because he wants to look good. It could be that vanity, or it could be that he's frail and he's trying to hide it. So that's a question we need to ask immediately. Also, look at his eyes. Look at the way Biden's eyes are. That doesn't look right. Now, it could be that I'm just not remembering the way Joe Biden's eyes normally look, but they look off. First of all, Joe Biden isn't looking at Stephanopoulos. According to the way this looks, and again, I just stopped it, but watch this throughout the debate, he doesn't look like he's looking at Stephanopoulos. He's looking at someone to the left of Stephanopoulos, behind Stephanopoulos. So I don't know who he's looking at or what he might be looking at, because we did see in the 2020 presidential election that some of the interviews with Joe Biden did have a screen with all of the questions and the answers of the interview, and they were just off camera. And we did see that when cameras returned, we were able to see those extra moments, and we saw that there is a screen with the questions and the answers, that Joe Biden has done that in the past. That could be the case here as well. We don't know. We're not getting a shot from Joe Biden's point of view at Stephanopoulos. And as I recall from the entire interview, you never get to see that. So we don't know what Biden is looking at right now. Again, that's a question of credibility. That's a question that does not go in favor of Joe Biden, and it takes away from Stephanopoulos and ABC. But let's go on.
Was this a bad episode or the sign of...
By the way, when I said to the left, I mean just past here. Notice the way they framed this. So we don't know what's over to this left. What they needed is a wide, in focus, clear shot. They make this look like it's a library that they're in, but I don't know why they would do the interview in a library. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Rather than a studio or anywhere else. But Okay, they're in a library. What's over here to the right of the ABC sign? What's in this? They've cropped this very carefully, so it looks, we don't know what's happening here. And that's where this area over here is where it seems that Joe Biden is looking at. Not at Stephanopoulos, but he looked like he was over here. What's here? They're hiding it from us. So again, it's a question and a hit to the credibility. Let's go on. The question, he thinks, is on the minds of millions of Americans. Here it comes.
A more serious condition.
It was a bad episode. No indication of any serious condition. I was exhausted. I didn't listen to my instincts in terms of preparing.
So he says he's exhausted. We're going to get into that in just a moment. But again, look at his eyes. Does it look like Joe Biden's reading? He doesn't look like he's responding, that he's looking at a person. It looks like he's reading to me. I could be wrong. You may have a different opinion about this. But to me, it looks like Joe Biden is reading, not interacting with another human being. And that's what I'm getting from his facial reactions here. I could be wrong. So Joe Biden, his answer is, I was exhausted. Okay.
And I had a bad night.
You know, you say you were exhausted, and I know you've said that before as well, but you came, and you did have a tough month, but you came home from Europe about 11 or 12 days before the debate, spent 6 days in Camp David. Why wasn't that enough rest time, enough recovery time?
That's interesting. So Joe Biden says, I was exhausted, I was tired, because he had taken a trip. Well, the trip was almost 2 weeks earlier. He had time to rest. We know he only works from 10 to 4 every day, so he's had plenty of time to rest up before this debate. We know that. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to say I was tired. He also says he had a cold. But that doesn't make any sense either. But actually, he's about to go into that now. Let me go on.
Because I was sick. I was feeling terrible. Matter of fact, the doc's with me. I asked if they did a...
So it's not that he was exhausted. It's that he was sick. If you were sick, why didn't you say that in the first place? When the question was, well, what happened? I had a bad night. Why? I was exhausted. Well, being exhausted isn't the same thing as I was sick. So why, if you were sick, why didn't you say you were sick? Why did you say you were exhausted? Oh, because you didn't expect him to say, well, you had 12 days to recover, and you only work 6 hours a day. So you've had plenty of time to recover. Oh, no, but it's because I was sick. You were sick? Wait a minute, but there was no announcement in the 12 days before the debate. There was no announcement that you were sick. There was no announcement the day of the debate that you had a cold. Because obviously you would tell the public about this. This would affect your voice. It would affect the way that you look. Your team would want the public to be aware that you're going to look and or sound different than normal, and you would announce, I have a cold. It's very simple. And everyone would appreciate and say, okay, well, he has a cold. That would explain his voice. That would explain the way he looks. It's simple. And anyone in the news media, anyone in press, anyone in politics would just say, okay, he's sick. That happens, not a big deal. But you didn't make that announcement. That didn't come out before. The only time someone ever said Joe Biden might be sick is after he was criticized for the event. After we saw MSNBC and CNN and their panels reviewing the debacle that was the debate. Only then, after we had Van Jones saying it's over, this is done, only then did you hear, oh, but he was sick. It was just a bad night because he was sick. Only after the spin to try and fix the problem did you hear that Joe Biden was sick. Only time. But that's just me giving you context. Let's hear. He says he was sick. He was feeling terrible.
COVID test, people were trying to figure out what was wrong. They did a test to see whether or not I had some infection, a virus. I didn't. They just had a really bad cold.
So he was so bad that he thought it was the pandemic. something that we are supposed to be so terrified of, the world was shut down. Something that if they thought he had that, when they notified the Trump campaign so that Trump could also get a test, wouldn't they notify everyone in the studio and say, hey, we think it might be, so shouldn't everyone get a test? Everyone? Oh, but they didn't do that because it wasn't that. So why bring it up? Why say, oh, I had a cold? You had a cold. Okay. You could say, I had a bad cold. Okay. Oh, I thought I had the pandemic. Then why didn't you notify anyone of that? Oh, it was that bad. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why did you hide that from the public? Again, this is a hit to credibility. This is unbelievable. Let's go on.
And did you ever watch the debate afterwards?
I don't think I did, no.
Well,
Now, rather than focusing on the logical question, as I did, which is, okay, why didn't you tell anyone? Why did you keep that secret? Why did your campaign hide this from the public? Rather than addressing that simple, straightforward, easy question, Stephanopoulos helps out Joe Biden and skips it. Goes on to something completely different. Stops the public, stops you from thinking about the excuses you've just heard, which one is exhaustion, and the second one is sickness. So when exhaustion doesn't work, sickness came in, and when that doesn't really make a lot of sense either, they go on to another subject, so you stop thinking about it. This is dishonest. And Stephanopoulos, he's been doing interviews long enough, he knows what he's doing. He's jumping subjects so that you, the audience, don't look for a response. He goes on, he says, did you watch it afterwards? And Biden says, I don't think I did, no. What do you mean you don't think you did? What do you mean you don't think you did? Either you did or you didn't. This is not an iffy question. We're not talking about did you translate something. It's not like, I don't even know how to say this. Either you did or you didn't. You know if you saw it. You know if you saw clips. You know if you saw the whole thing. It's very simple. I have seen this debate. This is now the third time. So I know that. And I've also seen several clips of it. It's easy. This is in my memory. It's not that hard to figure out. It's not an if, well, I can't possibly remember. This wasn't 4 years ago. Mind you, I remember interviews with Joe Biden from 4 years ago. I remember his town hall from 2021 and 2022. So you can remember things, but this shouldn't be difficult. This is about a week after his debate. He should know either you watched the debate or you watched clips of the debate or you saw none of it. It's a yes or no question. And he doesn't know. That means that adds a question to his mindset. And when we look at Joe Biden's face here, what do we see? We see, look at the concern. Look at his eyes. He's seeming to concentrate, like he's trying to remember. Like he's trying to make sure, did I see this? Do I remember seeing this? It's like he's searching for the memory as if this is something that happened a decade ago. This is something that happened recent memory. He should know this. It should be very clear and apparent. And he seems to be struggling to have this memory. That's not a good sign for cognitive abilities for Joe Biden. That's a sign of a problem. Let's go on.
What I want to get at is, what were you experiencing as you were going through the debate? Did you know how badly it was going?
Yeah, look, the whole way I prepared, nobody's fault, mine.
By the way, Stephanopoulos did not ask the follow-up question. What do you mean, I think I did? Logical follow-up. Very logical, very normal. If he is paying attention as an interviewer, and I have interviewed many people, local, state, federal government. I've been doing it for 18 years. I routinely interview candidates and elected officials. You listen to the person. Yes, I have my questions, but you also react to the person you are speaking with, and you react to their answers. And when they leave you something that says that doesn't make sense, you follow up. Stephanopoulos did not. This is a friendly interview. He's trying to help Joe Biden everywhere that he can. So he's going to leave that alone. And he goes on. So let's keep going.
Nobody's fault but mine. I prepared what I usually would do, sitting down, as I did come back with foreign leaders or the National Security Council, for explicit detail. And I realized about partway through that...
Did you hear this? I want you to go back on this. I just want you to hear this again. The whole way I prepared. Nobody's fault but his, Joe Biden's. Nobody's fault but Joe Biden's fault. Okay, fine.
I prepared what I usually would do, sitting down, as I did come back with foreign leaders.
I prepared what
the National Security Council.
What I usually would do, sitting down. So he's telling us his process on how he prepares. He sits down and he does what? He's preparing for this debate. So something about the way he prepared has to do with either his illness or his exhaustion, apparently. And it's part of the reason why he doesn't remember whether or not he saw the tape or saw the interview, the debate. So this is going to explain it. This is why he's telling us about his preparations. So he would sit down as he did come back with foreign
detail
leaders or national security. What? He prepares by sitting down as he did with foreign leaders or national security. So you sat down. I don't understand. That doesn't make any sense. That's not logical. That's not answering the question, nor is it answering the setup you've just provided by saying how you prepared. But let's go on.
And I realized about partway through that, I get quoted, the New York Times had me down at 10 points before the debate, 9 now, or whatever the hell it is. The fact of the matter is,
he's now talking about the New York Times and how he's doing in polling. What does that have to do with the preparations for the debate? Does that make any sense? He's gone from, he said he's going to take credit for the failure of the debate. Fair. He says, this is how I prepare for the debate. He sits down. Okay, and then what? He sits down like he does when he meets world leaders. Okay, I don't know what that means. I don't know why that's relevant. That tells me nothing about how he prepared. So when he sat down like he did when he sits down with world leaders, someone on his team, someone in the White House told him, some mysterious person told him he's losing by 10 points to Donald Trump. What does that have to do with preparation, about illness, about exhaustion? What does that have to do with anything that has been discussed so far? Nothing. I have no idea what Joe Biden is talking about. If you're paying attention to the debate, and very few people are, very few people have broken this down as I'm doing right now, and it doesn't make sense. What is he talking about? And you're hearing it, and we're reading his words. It doesn't fit in context. He's now talking about polling. How did we get to talking about polling and Trump when we were talking about preparations for a debate that he may or may not have ever seen afterwards? This doesn't answer the question at hand, and it doesn't advance the conversation. What Joe Biden is doing is he jumping. He's expecting that people, because they were paying attention to one thing, he switched tracks. Your mind goes, wait a minute, where am I? And you lose track of what's going on. Your mind suddenly is trying to catch up to what's he saying now, because I thought we were talking about one thing. Maybe we're talking about something else. So that confusion that hits you for a moment allows him to skip into a new subject altogether and takes you and basically derails the line of questioning to have a different line of questioning. Now, you can do that either on purpose or you can do it by accident. It happens both ways. So either Joe Biden is being very smart about this or he just lucked into this. But that's what he's just done. He's switching topics. Let's go on.
There is that what I looked at is that he
9 now. He thinks he did better in the polling. I love it. He goes, I was down 10. Now I'm down 9 or something like that. No, not something like that. You're being destroyed. You're being devastated in virtually every single poll. Actually, yeah, virtually every single poll since the debate has shown Joe Biden being devastated. In battleground states, 5-way, and head-to-head. He's being destroyed. And depending on the poll, some have more or less than 10 points. But yeah, it's substantial.
also lied 28 times. The way the debate ran, not my fault.
So now he's on another subject. So we've completely transitioned away from this debate was bad because it's his fault, because he was sick or he was exhausted. I don't know which one it is. So he's jumped all over the place right now. So he's gone from he was tired to he was sick. It's about the preparations he went through, which he doesn't tell us about, so he can tell us that he was down in the polls and it's Trump's fault. Trump lied. What does that have to do with being prepared for the debate, or whether he's seen the debate, or whether he was sick or he was tired at the debate? Trump, whether or not Trump lied once or every single word out of his mouth, it doesn't matter. That hasn't answered the questions so far that have been asked of Joe Biden. And it doesn't follow the line of logic that Joe Biden has put before us. It makes no sense. He wants to get into a subject separate of that. He wants to attack Donald Trump so that he can look like he's strong. He couldn't find a way to get from the question that was asked to be able to get to Trump. So now he's just skipped. He's just jumped into Trump. Polling Trump. That's it. He's distracting the public, and he's trying to deflect from the real issue at hand that he has been hiding from the start of this interview. Let's go on.
No one else's fault. No one else's fault.
But it seemed like you were having trouble from the first question in, even before he spoke.
Well, I just had a bad night. You've had some bad interviews once.
Well, and here's the problem. So George Stephanopoulos, who is a former DNC operative, who knows Joe Biden and he knows the Clintons. He's worked around Democrats for a long time. He's worked in campaigns before. He is being very friendly to Joe Biden. And rather than questioning Joe Biden on, wait a minute, you've jumped subjects, you were trying to explain how you prepared for this debate. You were trying to tell me whether you even saw the debate. You're trying to clarify whether you were sick or you were tired or both. You were trying to explain that. Now you've jumped to talk about Donald Trump. Why are you bringing up Trump? Why are you bringing up the polls? That has nothing to do with the questions I've asked. Why are you going there? So Stephanopoulos could have said that. He didn't. Instead, he's going with Joe Biden. And instead of challenging him on why he switched subjects, he's saying, yeah, but you are always looking bad in the debate. You always look bad. So it doesn't matter if Trump lied or not. You look bad. But you had a problem. His focus is on Joe Biden, not Donald Trump. And so he's trying to bring it back. He's trying to get control of the interview again to bring it back to what he wants to talk about. And Biden goes, well, I had a bad night. That doesn't answer the questions. But let's go on.
Well, I can't remember any, but I'm sure you did.
I've had plenty. I guess the question, the problem is here for a lot of Americans watching is you've said going back to 2020, watch.
So when Biden says, I've had a bad night, we've all had bad nights. Hell, I know I've had bad nights here on this program and doing this for the last 18 years. So I understand. We've all had bad interviews. We've all had bad nights. That happens. That's not the question here, because it's not a question of, was this just a bad night? Because there is evidence in this interview already, and we've only made it 3 minutes into the interview, and already there seems to be highly questionable things happening. we have questions about the mental status of Joe Biden 3 minutes into this interview. And Stephanopoulos is being as nice as he can to try and gloss over them, but they are apparent when we slow it down and we pay attention to both the pace and the quality, the substance of what is being said and what has not been said and what has been avoided. So let me go back.
To people who are concerned about your age. And, 50 million Americans watched that debate. It seemed to confirm fears they already had.
Well, look, after that debate, I did 10 major events in a row, including till 2 o'clock in the morning after that debate. I did events in North Carolina.
Okay, so before he goes further, Stephanopoulos also did something disingenuous here. 50 million Americans have been watching you when you say, watch me, and they're concerned about your age. No one is concerned about the age. Well, no, that's not correct. Very few people are worried about Joe Biden's age compared to his mental health. The question people are asking isn't that Joe Biden's 81 and he's going to drop dead. That's a concern. That's not the concern that is stopping Abigail Disney from giving money to the Democratic candidates. It's not the reason why the New York Times wrote an article saying we have to replace Joe Biden. It's not the reason why he's doing badly in polls. People aren't worried about he's 81. People are worried about he's not mentally there. What we saw George Stephanopoulos do in making this statement in the way he did, he's propping up Joe Biden. He's supporting Joe Biden, saying your mental health is not the issue. It's your age. Well, no, that's not true. And he knows that. That's disingenuous. That's dishonest. And he's changing the argument in the public's mind. So now you're thinking about Joe Biden's age, not his mental acuity. And that's really the question that was on display. Because when people were watching the debate and they were watching Joe Biden answer the questions, you weren't thinking he's 81. You were thinking he's not mentally there. He was a zombie on the stage. It didn't matter what his age was. He wasn't mentally there. That's the concern. When people say Joe Biden's only working 6 hours a day, when I say that Joe Biden, he's only working 6 hours a day, that's a part-time president. I'm not talking about the problem with his age. I'm talking about his ability. I'm talking about his mental acuity. That's the issue, and George Stephanopoulos knows it. And he chose to change the discussion, to change the way you think about the question and the answer. And that's because it's easier for Joe Biden to say, yeah, I'm 81, but I'm going to live to be 105. That answers the question. No, that's not the question. Because we're talking about, are you there? Are you mentally capable of doing the job? At this second, forget about the next 4 years. At this moment, can you do this? So Stephanopoulos is helping Joe Biden, and it's very deceptive. And if you don't follow politics, if you don't slow it down, you're not going to notice this. But it's very deceptive, and it's very misleading. I think it's really just wrong. But okay. And so he's now saying, well, look, I'm spry for my age. I did 10 major events in a row. Yeah, at what time? And what do you call a major event? And what were you doing at that event? And what medication did you take before you went on the stage at those events? And by the way, those events include when you have had prepared questions, like the 2 interviews that we were discussing earlier that came out today, that Joe Biden, the campaign, gave them the questions. They already knew the answers. So you're not walking into a hostile, difficult event. You walk in and you're doing an interview with someone you already know every question and every answer. That's not the same thing. So there is when we put this into context and understand that this is when, these major events, that includes when Joe Biden said that he's a black woman in the White House. Yeah, you had gaffes even then on the issue of mental acuity. So you're not answering things saying, I went and did 10 events. Yes, but they were bad events. They were setups. and you screwed up the setup. So you haven't answered the question, are you mentally capable of doing the job? He's dancing around the facts because context isn't being put in, and it should be. Yes, Mr. President, you did 10 events, and they were set up. You already knew the questions and the answers. And by the way, even with that, you still said you're a black woman. Can you please tell me, are you mentally there? But let's see what goes on.
I did events in Georgia. Did events like this today. Large crowds, overwhelming response, no slipping. And so I just had a bad...
I love this. He goes, I did events like this one here today, which we don't know what time of day it is. We don't know if he knew or knows all the questions and all the answers. And again, based on this angle, Joe Biden is not looking at George Stephanopoulos. He's looking to the left of George Stephanopoulos. He's looking somewhere completely different. So this is unfair. But again, okay. So we know what's going on there. So let's go on.
Night, I don't know why.
And how quickly did it come to you that you were having that bad night?
Well, it came to me as having a bad night when I realized that even when I was answering a question, even though they turned his mic off, he was still shouting. And I let it distract me. I'm not blaming it on that.
This is so crazy. This is so crazy. When did you know it was a bad night? When I got the question about healthcare, when I got the question about international politics, when I was answering and lost myself in the very first question of the night. The first question, and I got lost and didn't know what I was talking about. He's not answering anything here. He's basically just confusing this. He's not answering Stephanopoulos here. But he goes on to say,
but I realized that I just wasn't in control.
He says that Trump was still shouting. Now, this has been tested. Several people have looked into this, and it's very important. We hear Biden now saying, well, Trump was shouting. First of all, we had multiple images by CNN showing Trump and Biden at the same time while Biden was speaking. Trump didn't move his mouth. We saw several clips in the debate where the camera was on was on Trump when Biden was speaking, and he said nothing. In addition to that, something that most people, again, average person isn't going to pick this up. People who have been listening in the news media, who are into entertainment, what we know is if you listen to the event, you will hear Joe Biden was speaking so quietly that CNN had to turn up his microphone to the maximum. They were boosting him massively just to get him to be able to be at almost normal levels of that people could hear him. Now, the reason why that's important is when you are listening to Donald Trump speak throughout the event, you will hear Joe Biden both breathing and making comments. The microphones were up that high so that you could hear Biden on Trump's microphone. And that's a fact. People have heard that. So to say that and that's with Biden's microphone muted, Trump's microphone, they upped all the microphones, all the audio, so that you could hear. And the problem is, if that were true, you wouldn't be able to hear Biden. You'd have heard Trump clearly, and you didn't. No one has made the claim, and all of the news media, all the people reviewing this, they're not hearing Trump speak. And they would have, because they had Biden's audio cranked up because he was speaking so quietly, because his volume was so low. So that's just crap. He's lying to the public. He just expects that very few people have the expertise, nor did they have the ability to notice that that's not functionally correct, that he is lying to your face right now. And anyone who works with microphones, anyone who works in the industry knows and can debunk this and have debunked this. This is a flat out lie. And he just thinks you're too stupid to notice.
Control.
But part of the other concern is that this seems to fit into a pattern of decline.
But it wasn't, but Trump screaming at him, that wasn't distracting to him, and he didn't let it bother him, but it did bother him. No, that's not what we saw. That isn't what the public saw. That isn't reported. CNN did not report that. Jake Tapper has yet to say that Trump was screaming so much that it was distracting to anyone. That's just not true.
That has been reported on recently. New York Times had a headline on July 2nd, Biden's lapses are said to be increasingly common and worrisome. Here's what they wrote. People who have spent time with President Biden over the last few months or so said the lapses appear to have grown more frequent, more pronounced, and after Thursday's debate, more worrisome. By many accounts, as evidenced by video footage, observation, and interviews, Mr. Biden is not the same today as he was even when he took office 3.5 years ago. Similar reporting in the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal. Are you the same man today?
So they're referencing all the times, most recently, in the recent months, where we have seen Obama escorting Joe Biden off the stage, where we have seen Jill Biden escorting Joe Biden off of a stage, where we've seen Joe Biden being confused about where he's supposed to be going. His comments into audiences asking about people who are dead and he thinks are in the audience. Several of his missteps there that we have all seen that we were told, oh, well, that's just a cheap fake video. No, it's not. It was just a clip, but it was in context. That you misheard him, or all of the excuses that we've heard. The New York Times is now telling us they were all true. They were all valid, and they knew that these things were true and valid, even as they pushed the lie, saying, oh, no, this is fake. It's not real. It's MAGA. It's just you being a Republican. You don't know what you're talking about. Well, obviously, it's all been true. So what does Biden have to say about that?
That you were when you took office 3.5 years ago?
In terms of successes, yes. I also was the guy who put together a peace plan for the Middle East that may be.
In terms of success, no one said anything about whether or not he's successful. No one asked about his political record. This is Joe Biden trying to change the discussion. In terms of successes, yes, I am a different man. No one's asking you about your political record. They're talking about your personal health. And you know that. This is Joe Biden attempting to dodge the question. This is Joe Biden trying to change the subject, to change the way the audience is thinking about it. He's lying to your face. And he's saying, in terms of successes, well, if you really want to get into politics now, there are no successes. Because if there was a success, you would be running your re-election campaign, blasting across the news that you succeeded at something. But there is nothing you succeeded at. Unemployment's at 4.1%. That's increasing. We know that there's more global tensions than before. You started another war that you're involved in deeply. That's something that Obama did. That's not what Trump did. This is something that you did. You abandoned Americans around the world every year that you have been in office. Hostages are still being held. Inflation. There is no subject, illegal immigration. There is no subject that Joe Biden is doing well in or that he can point to and say, that was a success. Not one. Even when we're talking about things with like the interior. Pete Buttigieg completely screwed up. East Palestine, Ohio. And yet another example, which Joe Biden didn't respond to properly. And everyone agreed on that. There's nothing he can point to where there's a success. So when he says in terms of success, he's gaslighting America. He's changing the subject, and he knows it. He wants a different argument, a different mindset, rather than, again, thinking about his health, think about his mental health. He's trying to just readjust because it is true. Everyone is different. 3.5 years ago, we were in the middle of the pandemic. Everyone in the world has changed since that day. So let's be honest, everyone's different. And the fact that he's now 81, yes, you did change. Absolutely. Physically, absolutely. You had to. You're not Jack LaLanne. You have suffered. You have deteriorated. That is natural and human. So you are gaslighting the public here. He goes on to say,
Coming to fruition. I was also the guy that expanded NATO. I was also the guy that grew the economy.
He didn't put together a peace plan for the Middle East, and the Middle East is not peaceful. So let's get that correct. Donald Trump put together a peace plan for the Middle East. It's called the Abraham Accords, and it worked. And it had successes. That's why Donald Trump was nominated for 2 Nobel Peace Prizes, because of the Abraham Accords. Joe Biden didn't do that. He didn't. Now, the Abraham Accords continued in the Biden administration, but they weren't created by him. They have nothing to do with Middle East peace. Joe Biden has nothing to do with Middle East peace. And there is no Middle East peace. There is even less Middle East peace today than when Joe Biden took office. That is a fact. So he's lying to the public. Going on.
The individual things that were done were ideas I had or I fulfilled. I moved on. And so, for example,
expanding NATO is part of the reason why there is a war between Russia and the Ukraine. That's a problem. And by the way, all of that happened after the fact. When we saw Sweden getting in, when we saw the expansion of it, it's after the war started. It is a reaction to Russia. It's not because Joe Biden's a great guy and Joe Biden convinced a bunch of countries to join NATO. That isn't what happened. It's that Russia has amped up its military, and other nations are terrified of being attacked on their own. Sweden said, we need protection. We need backup because we can't defend against Russia if they come after us. So they're building a wall, and they knew that wasn't enough. So they joined NATO. That had nothing to do with Joe Biden. He isn't the reason why that happened, so he can't take credit for it. But let's go on. The economy sucks. 20% inflation at the least, according to CNN, and average people are saying somewhere closer to 40%. So again, 4.1% unemployment. He's lying. There are no successes. Let's go on.
Example, well, that was true then. What's Biden done lately? Just today, just announced 200,000 new jobs. We're moving in a direction that no one's ever.
When he says, oh, but that's all then. No, that's him losing track of where he was. He was trying to give you examples of his successes. He couldn't think of anything at the moment. So he now jumped. Joe Biden's been doing interviews for a long time. He's quite capable of doing it. Mind you, he plagiarizes a hell of a lot, but he knows the techniques. So he switched subject again. He ran out of things he could argue because details, facts, he doesn't have any. So he switched. And now he's going into another direction. What have I done lately? Let me try and give you something different to talk about than any of those things I just mentioned, because none of them are true. None of them are factual. All of them are something attributable to something else. They have nothing to do with success. So now he's going to switch it again.
Ever taken on, I know you know this from the days in the.
He just announced 200,000 new jobs. Well, we talked about this earlier in the live stream. 4.1% unemployment. The third month in a row of increases in the unemployment rate. Higher unemployment year over year by 0.5%. He is failing. The economy is failing. Higher interest rates, higher mortgages. This is bad for the economy. The economy has slowed down. We are in a recession and have been since August of 2022. He's talking about 200,000 jobs. By the way, that is under what was expected, but 200,000 jobs is not something to be excited about. He's failed. And he's trying to cover up because that's why he says 200,000 jobs, not the unemployment rate increased to 4.1%. He's trying to lie to you.
In the government, I took on Big Pharma. I beat them. No one said I could beat them. I took on all the things we said we got done. We were told we couldn't get.
He beat Big Pharma. How? How did he beat Big Pharma? Big Pharma made the pandemic, the jab, which he forced everyone to take, which we now know does have side effects that can affect people, and we still don't know what the full range of side effects are because there has never been a study done on this. The world is the living study on whether or not the jab is good or not for you or what side effects it may have, which usually takes 7 years. So he hasn't beaten Big Pharma. He hasn't done anything. Is he talking about the penicillin, which actually, under the executive order by Donald Trump, the price was lowered. Joe Biden came in, reversed the executive order, increased the price. A year later, put in his own executive order to lower the price so he could say he dropped the price of these medicines. It was already dropped. It was already done. He actually increased the price so he could drop it and take credit for it. That's dishonest. So no, he didn't beat Big Pharma. I don't even know how he can think like he did. His whole a good part of his time in elected office has been dependent on Big Pharma. Let's go on.
Get done. And part of it is what I said when I ran was
I took on all the things we said we got done. That makes no sense. I took on all the things we said we got done. That makes no sense.
do 3 things: restore some decency to the office, restore some support for the middle class instead of trickle-down economics built from the middle out and the bottom up, the way the wealthy still do fine, everyone does better, and unite the country.
But what has all that work over the last 3.5 years?
Wait a minute. He said 3 things. 3 things. I want to just go back. Things they were told they could not get done.
Restore some decency to the office. Restore some support.
I want to do 3 things, he says.
For the middle class instead of trickle-down economics built from the middle out and the bottom up.
I don't know. That's not an obligation of the office. That has nothing to do with being president. No one cares. No one was worried about the decency of the office when Bill Clinton was running. That wasn't the thing that people were worried about. That wasn't what America's... how do I say this? That's not the biggest concern. The biggest concern isn't... Just because you didn't like Donald Trump has nothing to do with anything else. That's not a responsibility of the president. It's just not. So that's useless, but that's 1. 2, restore some support for the middle class. Okay, that is a job of the presidency. That's 1 actual thing. 2 out of his 3 that he said he was going to tell us. And what's the 3rd?
The way the wealthy still do fine, everyone does better, and unite the country.
But what has all that work over the last 3.5 years cost you physically, mentally, emotionally?
Well,
there is no 3rd thing. He never gave us a 3rd thing. He said he had 3. He mentioned 1 that was useless, 1 that was actually his job, never went to a 3rd.
I just think it cost me a really bad night, bad run. But, George...
It cost him a bad night. It's ridiculous. Okay. So, my dog is, as people know, I have a 13-year-old dog. And I do, during Sundays, there's the first break around 2 hours in. We do take that. And then we've been on for about 5 hours. So we usually stop here. But I think I've made it clear at this point. And I hope people will clip this and share this with their friends. So we've gone through 6 minutes of the interview with Joe Biden. He's making no sense. He is dodging questions left and right. If anyone was honest, being an honest interviewer and paying attention to the details, Joe Biden would have been embarrassed. But that's not what's happening here. So I'm going to leave it at that. But that's what I want you guys to know. And we can go further. If you leave it in the comments, you want me to review the entire 30 minutes, I'll be happy to do that.